The ruins of the old star sanctuary floated alone in the dark space between two dead planets. No ship came near this place anymore. Most creatures in the galaxy believed dragons no longer existed. Their energy signals had disappeared hundreds of years ago, and no one had tried to find them since. Broken towers and twisted metal hung in the void, silent and cold. Only one sound broke the emptiness, a weak, pitiful cry. Deep inside the sanctuary, in a shadowed corridor that once held the hatcheries, a tiny dragon lay curled on the cold floor. Her scales were pale silver, and her wings were small and thin, too fragile to lift her. She could not see. Her eyes had never opened. She did not know where her mother had gone or why the halls were empty. All she knew was hunger, loneliness, and the echo of her own voice in the empty space. She cried, soft at first, then louder, until her tiny voice bounced off the walls. The dragon's name was Aurelin. She did not understand the word, alone, but she knew it through fear. She stretched her claws over the cracked floor and pulled herself toward the faint warmth of a broken solar panel. Every step was slow and painful. Her wings fluttered weakly, but they could not carry her. Her cries grew louder, but no one came. The sanctuary was dead to the galaxy, and Aurelin had no one. Far above, a human ship moved through the empty zone. The craft was small and patched, carrying only one person. Merrick Solon was an engineer, not a soldier or an adventurer. He spent his life repairing old stations, salvaging broken ships, and charting empty corners of space for anyone willing to pay. He was not seeking dragons. In fact, he did not believe they were real anymore. But Marek's ship was equipped with sensitive sensors. As he passed near the ruins, a strange signal caught his attention. It was faint and irregular, unlike the hum of machines or the pulse of energy from dying stars. He focused his scanner and froze. The reading was small, almost like a heartbeat, but it was alive. Something was calling out. Merrick adjusted his course carefully. It was dangerous, no one went here. The ruins had a history of traps, and some said creatures still lived in the shadows. When he landed, the doors opened to darkness. Merrick stepped carefully onto the cracked metal floors, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Then he heard it, the crying. Soft at first, almost a whisper, then louder. It was a sound he had never heard before, both painful and innocent. Marek's heart thumped. He could not explain why, but he felt he had to follow the sound. He walked deeper into the sanctuary. The walls were broken, wires hanging like vines. The floors were uneven, and broken panels threatened to collapse under his weight. The cries grew louder and sharper. Then he saw her. A small movement on the floor, scales shining faintly in the flashlight. The dragon stirred, trembling and curling up. Aurelin sensed him before she could see him. Fear froze her tiny body. She hissed quietly, a sound that tried to protect her from a threat she could not even see. But Merrick did not move toward her quickly. He knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible. He spoke in a low, calm voice. "I won't hurt you," he said. "I'm not here to take you." The dragon's ears twitched. She had never heard a voice like this. Most creatures in stories came to take or harm young dragons. But this human sounded different. There was no threat in his tone, only something warm and gentle. Aurelin stayed still, but her claws loosened on the floor. She did not understand the human, but she sensed he would not hurt her. Merrick waited. He removed his helmet and sat down a few feet away. He spoke softly again, telling her his name, telling her she was safe. Every word seemed to reach through the darkness and into the small dragon's heart. She lifted her head, tilting it toward him, curious but cautious. Her wings twitched, not in flight but in nervousness. Hours passed. Merrick stayed in place, sharing small amounts of his food and letting her approach when she dared. Slowly she crawled closer. Her claw brushed against his hand. It was the first touch she had ever made that was not cold, harsh, or dangerous. Merrick smiled quietly. "There you go," he whispered. "You're safe now." The abandoned sanctuary suddenly felt less like a prison and more like a place where something could live again. The broken walls, the empty halls, the silence, all of it became a backdrop for a fragile new trust. Merrick understood something very simple. This little dragon did not need power, it did not need treasure, and it did not need fear. She needed kindness. He stayed until the lights in his ship flickered outside. He could not leave her in the ruins, but he also knew it would be dangerous to take her away without planning. Aurelin looked at him, blinking her unseeing eyes. Merrick reached out slowly, letting her touch his fingers again. She pressed her tiny snout against his hand, and for the first time since she was born, she did not feel alone. As Merrick lifted her gently into his arms, she nuzzled against his chest. She could not see him, but she could feel his heartbeat. She could feel warmth. She could feel safety. Outside the ruins, the stars were cold and empty, but inside that small human's arms, Oralyn felt a spark of life she had never known before. Merrick turned back to the corridor he had come through, glancing at the silent, broken sanctuary one last time. He knew the galaxy might never forgive him for taking a dragon. He knew that what he was doing might put him in danger. But looking at the small dragon who had cried alone for years, he could not leave her behind. Not when she had finally found someone to trust. As they moved toward his ship, the cries stopped. Oralyn lay still in his arms, breathing softly, finally calm. Merrick knew this was only the beginning. There was a long journey ahead, and the galaxy would notice soon enough that a blind dragon had been found alive, and that the human who dared to help her had chosen kindness over fear. The stars outside seemed to shimmer slightly brighter, almost as if they were watching. And somewhere in the void, the echo of a small dragon's first trust spread quietly, carrying a message the galaxy had almost forgotten. Life is worth protecting and courage can be simple. Merrick carefully carried Oralyn through the empty halls of the ruined sanctuary. Every step made soft echoes, and the little dragon trembled in his arms. She had never felt a hand before, never known warmth or comfort. Her tiny claws twitched as if testing him, and Merrick kept his hand steady under her belly so she would feel safe. Outside, the cold metal of the corridor gave way to the docking bay of his ship. He had brought her here carefully, avoiding the broken panels and sharp edges. Oralyn sniffed the air cautiously, her small head moving from side to side. She did not see, but she could sense the vibrations in the floor, the subtle warmth of Marek's body, and the quiet hum of life that came from the ship's engine. Merrick knelt down beside the dragon and placed her gently on the floor. Her claws clicked softly against the metal. She froze, expecting danger. Her instincts told her to run, but she could not run far. Merrick stayed very still. He did not reach out to grab her. He only extended his hand, palm up, toward her. He did not try to touch her by force. He simply waited. The dragon's small claws hovered over his fingers. Merrick whispered softly, "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. You can touch me if you want." It took time. Oralyn's claws brushed against his skin once, lightly. Then she pulled back. She hesitated. She did not understand why the human did not try to hold her tightly or take her away. In her short life she had only known force, cold chains, sharp teeth, or loud threats. But Merrick did not move. His stillness spoke to her. He was patient, and patience was something she had never felt. Slowly she pressed her snout against his fingers. She could feel warmth and hear a heartbeat. It was steady and calm. Merrick smiled softly. "There you go," he said. "You are safe." He did not try to grab her, hold her down, or even touch her more than she allowed. For the first time she understood trust, not the trust of fear but the trust of choice. Oralyn began to explore his hand with her small, delicate claws. She poked, pressed, and even curled her tiny wing against it. Merrick kept talking to her, describing everything he did, explaining where they were, and even telling her small stories of other stars he had seen. She could not see him, but his words painted pictures in her mind. She felt the tone, the rhythm, the calmness of his voice. After a while, Merrick offered her a small piece of food. She sniffed it, wary at first. Then slowly she ate. Merrick watched her carefully, noting every movement. She was weak and thin, her body shaped for flight but not yet able to fly. Her wings were fragile. Her legs shook. Merrick realized she had survived alone in the ruins for too long. He lifted her gently and carried her to a small corner of the ship he had prepared for sleeping. It was simple, a soft, warm blanket in a container that could be closed to keep her safe. He spoke softly again, "This is your place for now. No one will take you. You are safe with me." Oralyn hesitated, sniffed, and then curled up. For the first time, she slept without fear, her tiny body pressing against the warmth of his jacket. As she slept, Merrick thought about the galaxy outside. A dragon baby was not just rare, it was believed extinct. Many would see her as a weapon, a treasure, or even a threat. He knew he could not keep her a secret forever. There would be sensors, patrols, and alien ships looking for signs of dragon energy. But he also knew that this dragon had no one to protect her, no family, no home. She had only him. The next morning, Oralyn stirred. She reached out her claw, finding Marek's hand instinctively. She pressed against it, searching for warmth and safety. Merrick smiled. He lifted her up and whispered, "Come on, little one. Today we start learning about each other." He began to teach her simple things. He let her walk on the floor beside him, guiding her gently with his hand. She stumbled at first, her legs weak, but she learned quickly. She explored the ship, sniffing the air vents, listening to the engines, and even learning to recognize the vibration of the floor that marked where Merrick was walking. Every small step built trust. Every careful word and gentle movement told her she could survive in this world because she had a protector who would not take, only offer. Orlin's senses grew sharper. Though she could not see, she began to recognize sounds. Marek's footsteps, the hum of the ship's engines, the soft vibration of his breathing. She learned to follow these cues, staying close without fear. She did not yet understand that humans could be cruel, only that this one human was patient and kind. Merrick spent hours explaining things to her. He described the stars outside the ship, the silence of space, and even the stories of other creatures he had met in distant worlds. He talked about colors she could not see, describing sunsets on planets she would never visit, moons that glowed, and the sparkle of distant stars. Orlin listened, tilting her head to feel the sound of words. She began to associate his voice with safety, his presence with comfort, and his hand with protection. Days passed. Orlin grew stronger, and her wings twitched more often, though she did not yet fly. Merrick continued to be patient. He never forced her to do anything. She approached him by choice, pressed against him when scared, and slept beside him at night. In return, Merrick learned from her, the way she could sense vibrations, the way she reacted to emotions, the way she communicated through tiny sounds that humans could barely understand. One evening, as the ship floated silently in the ruins of the sanctuary, Merrick reached out his hand again. This time, Orlin crawled fully into it, wrapping herself against his fingers and pressing her snout against his palm. Merrick held her gently, letting her feel safe. No one had ever offered her trust without taking something in return. Merrick did not take. He only gave, and in that act, the bond between human and dragon deepened. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, but inside the small ship, a tiny dragon had found her first home, and a human had found a reason to protect something fragile, something precious, simply because it was alive. The galaxy beyond might never understand why he risked everything, but Merrick did not care. He had offered a hand, and the dragon had chosen to trust it. And for the first time in her life, Orlin did not cry alone. Merrick and Orlin had been floating in the quiet ruins for days. The little dragon was no longer trembling constantly. She had learned the sound of Marek's steps, the vibration of the ship's floors, and the warmth of his hand. Every day she explored a little more. Every day Merrick spoke to her, describing the stars, the planets, and the endless black of space outside. But the galaxy was not so quiet. The small energy signals from Orlin's body were beginning to reach farther than Merrick realized. Other ships, scanning the void for rare energy readings, noticed something unusual. A dragon's energy pulse, faint but alive, showed up on long-range sensors. For hundreds of years, no dragons had been detected. Now one was moving, alive, and unprotected in the empty spaces. News spread quickly. Within hours, several distant species picked up the signal. Scientists and officials who had only heard of dragons as stories were stunned. Some wanted to study the creature. Others saw it as a weapon to control. Some feared it might grow too powerful to ignore. And through it all, the one who had discovered and protected the dragon was human, a species many believed were clever but weak, always chasing others for profit or power. Merrick did not know how many ships were watching him, nor how close they were. He only knew that hiding in the ruins would not last forever. He prepared his ship for a journey not to escape but to protect. He made sure Orlin had a safe place inside, a soft corner to sleep, food that suited her, and enough space to move. He never tried to restrain her. She moved freely within the small cabin, learning, growing stronger, and trusting him more each day. Meanwhile, Orlin grew more confident. She still could not see, but she began to explore the sounds of the ship and the patterns of movement. She learned to follow Merrick without fear. If he paused, she paused. If he moved quickly, she adjusted. She began to understand his emotions, calmness, worry, joy, through his voice and the subtle vibrations of his footsteps. The bond between them grew stronger with every passing day. It was on the fourth day that Merrick first noticed the approaching fleet. At first, it was only a small blip on the long-range scanner. He froze, realizing the energy readings were matching a patrol from the Galactic Council. This fleet was not casual observers. They were serious, trained, and ready for action. If they found him, they might demand the dragon. Some species would stop at nothing to claim her. Merrick held Orlin close, feeling her small heart beat against his chest. She sensed the tension. Her tiny claws dug slightly into his jacket, and she pressed her head against him. Merrick spoke softly, "It's okay, little one. We'll face this together. I won't let anyone take you." The fleet's ships appeared outside the ruins like dark stars blinking into existence. Sensors and communications channels opened automatically. Voices spoke across space, demanding identification, asking Merrick to surrender the dragon, offering rewards or warning of consequences. But Merrick did not panic. He responded only once, clearly and calmly, "This dragon is not a weapon. She is a child. She belongs to no one but herself." The fleet paused. Their communications continued, but Marek's words had an unexpected effect. The council officers had expected fear, bargaining, or resistance. They did not expect calm. They did not expect clarity. And most importantly, they did not expect a human to protect a dragon out of choice, not gain. Inside the ship, Oralyn began to react to the voices outside. She tilted her head, listening, her wings fluttering slightly. She sensed the vibrations of danger, but also the safety of Marek's presence. Merrick held her tightly, stroking her back gently, whispering, "Stay calm. You're safe. Trust me." The council continued their warnings, but Merrick ignored the pressure. He focused on Oralyn, making sure she understood she had control over her own life. She wanted to hide, she could. She wanted to move, she could. Marek's patience and respect gave her confidence. She was not a prize. She was not a tool. She was a living creature capable of choice. Other species watching the situation began to notice the same thing. A dragon was alive, blind and small, and a human was protecting it without force. No threats, no weapons, no tricks, just patience, care, and kindness. Many were shocked. In a galaxy that often rewarded power, fear, and control, here was a different kind of strength. Moral courage. 4 days, Merrick maneuvered the ship carefully, avoiding direct confrontation. Oralyn learned to navigate the small cabin more confidently. She listened to Marek's instructions, moved with him, and even began to anticipate danger in small ways, responding to the vibrations of approaching ships. The bond between them became almost telepathic. When Merrick paused, she paused. When he whispered, she reacted with trust. Despite the danger outside, there was a quiet victory inside the ship. Merrick realized that the galaxy had begun to notice not because of technology or power, but because of a simple choice: to protect life instead of seeking gain. He did not need a fleet or weapons. He only needed to care, and his actions were louder than any threat. One evening, after maneuvering past a patrol without being detected, Merrick sat with Oralyn on his lap. He looked at the stars and whispered stories about the worlds he had seen. Oralyn leaned against him, listening, feeling warmth and safety. She had survived alone for weeks, but now she understood trust and comfort. She was no longer just a lost dragon. She was a creature who had learned to rely on the human beside her. The fleet continued to watch from a distance, still unsure how to handle a human and a dragon who refused to be controlled. Some whispered that perhaps humans were capable of more than they realized. Some even began to question the ethics of taking creatures for power. The galaxy was noticing something it had almost forgotten: that courage could be quiet and strength could come from compassion. Merrick held Oralyn gently and smiled. He knew this was only the beginning. Challenges would come and the galaxy would continue to test them. But as long as he had patience and respect, and as long as Oralyn had trust in him, they could face anything. Together they were more than a human and a dragon, they were a message to the stars. And somewhere far away, in fleets and council chambers, the story of a small, blind dragon and the human who protected her quietly began to spread. The galaxy had noticed, and the ripple of one choice, a hand offered without taking, was beginning to change the way beings thought about courage, kindness, and strength. The fleet that had been watching Marek's ship grew restless. They had expected a human to panic or surrender. They had expected the dragon to be afraid, to be taken, or to be forced into submission. But neither had acted as predicted. Merrick continued to move calmly, and Oralyn had begun to show something no one expected: awareness and choice. Inside the small cabin, Oralyn pressed her small snout against Marek's hand, listening to the quiet hum of the ship. She could feel the vibrations outside, the fleet waiting, watching, waiting for a sign of weakness. She could feel the fear of the alien officers through the distant energy sensors. But more importantly, she could feel Marek's calm, his heartbeat steady, his hand offering nothing but care. Merrick looked down at her and whispered, "We cannot let them scare us, little one. They cannot take what you do not give." Oralyn lifted her head slightly, tilting it toward his voice. She had learned to trust him, to understand that no one could force her. The choice was hers. The first communication from the fleet came through. A stern, commanding voice demanded, "Human, surrender the dragon immediately, or we will be forced to take her by force." You cannot resist the Galactic Council. Merrick responded simply, she is not a weapon. She is not property. She is a child. She chooses who she trusts. The voice paused, surprised. No one had spoken this way before. The council had expected bargaining, excuses, or fear. Instead, the human had placed choice above obedience. Oralyn stirred. For the first time, she seemed to understand more than instinct. She pushed herself lightly off Marek's lap and stepped onto the floor. The sensors on the fleet ships picked up the faint energy pulse of her movement. She was small, blind, and alone, but she was moving on her own. Merrick held his hand out to her but did not touch her. It's your choice, he whispered. You can stay here, or you can hide, or you can show them who you are. The little dragon paused, then stepped forward slowly. She felt the vibrations of the cabin floor, felt the warmth of Marek's hand nearby, and sensed the tension outside. Then she did something no one expected. She released a pulse of energy. It was not fire. It was not a weapon. It was a soft wave of emotion. Every being that could sense it in the nearby fleet felt it: fear, loneliness, trust, and calm. It was the story of her short life, the pain of abandonment, and the safety she had finally found. The council ships froze. Officers whispered to each other across channels. Some tried to issue orders, but the energy wave was too strong to ignore. It was not aggression. It was not threat. It was choice. The dragon was showing them she trusted the human beside her. She would follow no one else. Merrick knelt down again, letting her step back into his hand. See, he whispered. Your choice matters. You are not theirs. You are yours. Oralyn curled into his palm and pressed her snout against his fingers. She had made the choice. She would stay with him not because she was forced but because she wanted to. The fleet withdrew slightly, unsure how to respond. They had prepared for force and strategy, but this was different. A dragon that could choose, a human who would not take, and a bond neither technology nor threats could break. The officers began to debate, realizing that trying to force the creature would be morally wrong and potentially dangerous. Merrick did not need weapons or tricks. He had patience, calm, and respect. Oralyn had courage, awareness, and the ability to choose. Together they had done what no fleet, no council, and no plan could: show that strength could exist without aggression and courage could come from compassion. The small dragon pressed herself closer to Marek's chest. She had survived alone for weeks, but now she understood that she was not powerless. She could choose safety, trust, and life. She had learned from a human that being strong did not always mean fighting. Sometimes strength meant caring, sometimes courage meant waiting, and sometimes survival meant choosing carefully. For the first time, the galaxy saw something new. Reports of Merrick and the dragon spread slowly through the council channels and into distant fleets. Stories began to circulate that humans were not only clever, but capable of protecting life with patience and respect. They could influence even the most powerful beings without weapons or authority. Oralyn had grown stronger in the days of flightless practice. Her wings twitched and stretched more than before. She explored the ship, listening to the vibration of the engines and the patterns of Marek's steps. She understood commands, guidance, and caution. But most importantly, she understood choice. Every time she pressed against Marek's hand, every time she curled into his palm, it was because she wanted to. She had chosen. Merrick looked at her and whispered, "You are small but you are brave. You are not afraid to choose, and that makes you stronger than anyone who cannot." Oralyn tilted her head toward his voice, tilting it in a way that Merrick had learned meant she understood. She chirped softly, a sound full of trust and recognition. The fleet eventually began to retreat. The council decided to leave them alone. No laws could claim the dragon, no threats could take her. Merrick had not used power. Oralyn had not used fear. Together they had won by choosing differently. Later, as the ship floated silently through the void, Merrick prepared a small space for Oralyn to rest. She curled against a warm blanket, pressing her small body against him. He whispered stories of stars, planets, and the lives they might see together. She listened, eyes closed, trusting him completely. The galaxy would continue to watch. The story of a small dragon who could choose, and a human who did not take but offered, was spreading. Fleets, councils, and distant species would remember this moment. They would remember that true courage sometimes comes in quiet forms, that strength can exist without force, and that life can be protected simply by choosing to care. Oralyn slept peacefully, her wings tucked close. Marek's hand rested gently over her, not holding, not controlling, only offering warmth. Outside, the stars were cold, distant, and silent. Inside, a small dragon and a human had shown something impossible to the galaxy. That choice, compassion, and trust could be stronger than fear, stronger than rules, stronger than armies. And so, the small dragon had chosen. And because she chose, the galaxy had begun to learn what humans could teach it: strength without aggression, courage without threat, and love without demand. The fleet had withdrawn. The council had decided that no one could take Aurelin. They could study dragons later, yes, but only with consent. No laws allowed them to claim a living creature against its will. Merrick had not used weapons, power, or threats. He had only acted with patience, care, and respect. And the galaxy had watched. Merrick steered the ship away from the ruins, toward a quiet star system far from patrol routes. Aurelin rested in his lap, small and soft, her silver scales reflecting the faint glow of the ship's lights. She had grown stronger over the past weeks. Her wings twitched and stretched, ready to learn flight when the time came. She could not see, but she could sense Marek's presence and the warmth he gave her. She trusted him completely, not because he controlled her but because he had never tried to. Marek looked down at her and smiled. "You are free to choose," he whispered. "And because of that you are safe." Aurelin chirped softly, a sound full of contentment. She had survived the ruins, the cold, the loneliness, and now she had someone who truly cared for her. News of their story had already begun to spread. Across distant systems, councils and fleets debated the meaning of what they had witnessed. A human had protected a dragon without claiming it. The dragon had trusted the human by choice, not fear. Some species began to rethink their ideas about humans, about strength, and about courage. The story became an example, slowly, quietly, that life could be protected with patience and respect, not weapons or domination. As Merrick and Aurelin traveled through the stars, he prepared a small station near a warm, quiet planet. It was simple, not luxurious but safe. He built places for the dragon to sleep, for her to exercise her wings, and for her to explore without danger. He even left openings in the wall so she could sense the wind and vibrations outside, to feel the life of the planet around her. Aurelin tested her wings carefully. She flapped slowly, sometimes lifting slightly, other times stumbling back to Merrick for support. He laughed quietly, speaking encouragement. "Take your time. There's no rush. You decide when you fly." She pressed against him, chirping softly, and Merrick felt a quiet joy. This little dragon, once alone and abandoned, had learned what trust meant. Days passed and Aurelin grew stronger. Other dragons, sensing her energy, began to arrive, following instincts that led them to places of safety and kindness. They were young, fragile, and uncertain, but they too found Marek's presence reassuring. He did not command them. He did not force them to follow him. He only offered warmth, food, and care. And they chose to stay. The galaxy slowly began to remember humans differently. Across species, beings whispered about a human who had acted without ambition, without fear, without desire for gain. A human who had not used force, not sought rewards, and not tried to control. This human had protected life, guided a blind dragon, and let choice be the strongest power. Merrick lived quietly. He refused fame, refused rewards, and refused offers of power. He preferred to watch the dragons grow, to guide them gently, and to learn from them. Aurelin became his constant companion, resting beside him, pressing against his chest when she wanted comfort, exploring when she felt brave. She had become a symbol, though Merrick did not think of it that way. To him, she was a friend, a creature to protect, and a reminder of the quiet courage that made life worth living. Other species began to send humans small tasks, requests for advice, or messages of trust. They had learned something important: that humans could inspire loyalty, compassion, and understanding, even across dangerous or unknown territories. A species once thought weak had shown strength in a way armies never could. Aurelin chirped one evening, settling on Marek's lap as the station floated silently in orbit. The stars shone cold and distant outside the windows, but inside, warmth and quiet filled the room. Marek stroked her scales gently. "You see," he whispered, "life is worth protecting. Courage comes in many forms. And kindness can change everything." The small dragon lifted her head and pressed her snout against his hand. Her choice had been hers from the start. Merrick had only offered a hand, a voice, and patience. And that choice had created something stronger than fear, stronger than rules, stronger than power: trust. Across the galaxy, fleets and councils remembered the events. They remembered the small dragon who could choose, the human who never forced her, and the quiet victory that had changed how life would be treated. Humans were no longer just observers. They were protectors, teachers, and examples of compassion. Their strength was not in weapons but in restraint. Their courage was not in conquest but in care. The story spread slowly, quietly as stories often do. Dragons came to know that humans could be safe and kind. Humans themselves began to understand their own potential, not through force or fear but through choice and responsibility. The galaxy remembered the day a blind dragon chose a human, and a human chose to protect life without taking it. Years passed. Oralyn grew larger, stronger, but she remained blind. She did not need sight. She could feel the world in ways humans could not understand. She knew Marek's voice, his heartbeat, the warmth of his hand, and the quiet safety he offered. She was free to choose every day and she always chose him. Marek continued his quiet life. He repaired small ships, charted new paths, and cared for the dragons that had come to trust him. He never sought recognition. Fame was irrelevant. But the galaxy had learned. Across stars, systems, and councils, humans were remembered not as conquerors but as guardians. They were capable of compassion, patience, and courage that could change the course of life itself. And so, under the cold glow of distant stars, in a small station near a quiet planet, a human and a blind dragon rested together. The galaxy had witnessed a simple truth. Life is precious, trust is powerful, and one quiet choice can echo across the stars forever. Oralyn pressed her head against Marek's chest. Marek rested his hand gently over her. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The stars remembered for them. And in that silence, the galaxy understood what humans could teach, that protecting life, respecting choice, and showing kindness could be the greatest strength of all.